This series was made possible thanks to the generosity of these patrons and from the likes and watch time of viewers like you. Thank you for your support.
Read the disclaimers, and please use common sense.
Authorize.
With my desk ahead onward I strode, hoping that the roof will not implode. What the hell?
Progue, rise! Torpedo, rise! Rising hopper!
A jump to the sky turns to a rider kick.
Jesus. I gotta think of some safer ways to open these reviews. When I made my best of 2021 list at the start of the year, I coined the term painfully average to describe figures that are neither good enough nor bad enough to get a review on this channel. They aren't good enough or bad enough to make an interesting point about, and it would feel disingenuous to just prattle off somebody else's opinion that had been spewed out 9,000 billion times. So that begs the question. When I was told that there is a specific mold out in Legacy that is painfully average, why then did I find that I had a lot to say about it, despite the fact that it really is average, and I really shouldn't have anything interesting to say about it? Well, let's find out. Salutations, denizens of the internet. I'm Firebite27, and let us commence our analysis of Transformers Legacy Kickback. I'm not sure why they left out the universe preamble for that one. They've been making such a big deal of it. Anyways, on to the figure itself. Starting in beast mode, we can see that Kickback turns into, well, a grasshopper. What kind of grasshopper? I don't know. It's not like Kamen Rider Zero-One, where the color scheme is like a super nerdy reference to a real-life grasshopper. That's the milkweed grasshopper for those playing at home. And it's not like it's super detailed or anything. It's mostly just a robotic interpretation of a grasshopper. There's not really much to say about it. Or is there? While a cursory glance may make it seem as though this figure is far too much in line with the current Sunbow-centric design ethos, seeing as how the detail might appear flatter than my mascot, Maya Trix.
Excuse me, what did you say, you pervert?
Maya, I was referring to the fact that you are a series of two-dimensional images. Besides, as far as I'm concerned, you should be glad that I decided against making you a sentient NFT in this show's canon. As I was saying, while it may look flat at a cursory glance, there's actually quite a lot of molded detail here, and quite a lot of it is painted. We've got panel lines, we've got vents, we've got what looks like rivets, we've got what looks like wiring or like tubes for pistons, I don't know. We've got circle thingies, we've got little slits here and there all around the figure, and we've even got what looks like drawers for filing cabinets. So I guess when he's not trying to eat everything in sight, Kickback actually has a second job working at H&R Block. Not to mention, it also gives us some totally unnecessary actual insect detail on the wings. I'm of two minds about this. For starters, while I do think that the organic detailing is really cool and looks nice, unfortunately it blends into the other side of the wing where we have the detailing from the original G1 toy sculpted. The lines that make it look like an actual piece of metal. And while I do like both sides, I wish I had just gone with one. maybe painted one side to highlight it in silver. And I know I'm gonna get at least one person saying, "Oh, well, you could just paint it yourself." And to that I say, "Be gone, hot!" You are ignoring the people who have valid reasons not to customize their figures. It requires a certain amount of know-how, budget, and also certain materials that might not be available to everyone. Certain paints can damage plastic, certain rubbing alcohols to remove paint can damage the plastic, and considering that figures are getting around $25 at least in the deluxe range per deluxe, yeah, that's not a risk I think many people would like to take. What I'm ultimately trying to say is that I hear your argument, pro-customization collectors, but please shut up. And while we're talking about the paint, I also gotta say, the paint job here on the figure is pretty decent. I mean, it's not amazing, unlike last week's review, Cybertron Universe Override, but it is solid. We've got silver here underneath the chest plate, which I'll get to in a second. We've got blue on that chest plate as well, and what appears to be some gold. We've also got yellow here on the antennae, which really makes them and what I assume to be the eyes pop. We've got silver for the mouth, which just ignore that red peeking out underneath the mouth. And speaking of red, we've also got red here on the backs of the legs on these vents. We've got also these little intakes here, which are highlighted in yellow. And overall, it looks great. Wish I could say the same for the weapon storage. We've got 3 of them. First off is these twin swords that are made of clear plastic, but painted in purple clear paint. And then we've got a gun, which is painted in silver and metallic purple. Both of these look great on their own. However, the way they integrate into the bug mode, well, the way that it's shown, at least in promotion for Kickback, is it's not exactly the most, I don't know how to describe it. You just slap the swords here onto the side of the wings and bam, that's done. And then for like the gun, you take it and slot it in underneath and like, okay, weapon storage, cool, but like, doesn't really add anything. It doesn't take away anything, but certainly doesn't add anything. And the wings especially look really bad with these attached. Like, is this supposed to be like some kind of aura? Like, it's implying that this is a stand someone manifested? Like, some kind of grasshopper-themed colony stand? I don't know. But these swords do have a more cool method of integration. However, it wasn't intended for this release. You basically take the little pegs here on the sides, and you've got 2 little ports here on either end. Slide one peg into one port on the opposite end of the sword, and then spread them, and in the words of Jobby the Hong, put it in his ass. Yeah, sorry, I really shouldn't have done that. But you can see here, it kind of forms this sort of like, I guess, I don't know what it's called. I know what it's called. Get back to me on that one. It looks like a cool emulation of that part of the bug, and like, it makes me smile. It's cute. And while the weapon storage isn't great, it's certainly not as bad as the articulation, but even that's not too bad. It's just disappointing.
In grasshopper mode, Kickback has ball-jointed feet on his back legs, a knee and universal joint at what I suppose is his hips, a 360-degree rotation at his wings, a hinge at his middle legs, 2 hinges at the front, and both middle.
Thank you, Maya. While I will say that the articulation isn't terrible, it's a little disappointing compared to what we had in Kingdom. There were tons of well-articulated beast modes there, and going back to something a bit more basic just, it feels like a downgrade, no other way of putting it. However, again, while it is average, I wouldn't say that's bad. I'd say that there's a lot of good here, from the paint to the sculpted detail to even the personality of this little dorky bug. I especially love how innocent and vulnerable that these eyes look here. Granted, I wish they could have been more obvious as eyes if they had like painted the tubing here that connects the actual, I guess these are flashlights attached to the antennae. Like if they had painted that tubing leading up to them silver. But again, that's cartoon and toy accurate, so I don't totally hold it against the figure. Having said that, I will say that this figure definitely feels taller in beast mode than it really should feel. And that's because of these wings. They are great and all, but damn, they have a lot of height. So yeah, let's do them size comparisons before we move on to robot mode. Here's Legacy Kickback next to my last review, Velocitron Speedia 500 Cybertron Universe Override. Another figure from Wave 1 that's pretty average, Legacy Skids. Another figure from Legacy Wave 1 that actually had the complete opposite effect of Kickback, Legacy Dragstrip. Here he is next to another bug that's made of metal, Transmetal Waspinator. Here he is next to another Transmetal figure, Transmetal 2 Prowl. And here he is next to a standard Hutama, standard can of Sparkling Water, and Frodside. So, yeah, while I normally don't go for the bots that are in the middle, because I don't really like how uninteresting they are, I gotta say, Kickback came as a pleasant surprise, and gave me quite a bit more to talk about than I honestly expected.
Why don't we go, everybody? What the heck are you waiting for?
So here is Kickback's robot mode, and it's a G1 Kickback. Really, what can I say? I don't know what to say, apart from things I've already said, like, the detail looks great despite how flat it looks at a cursory glance. I mean, I do have more to talk about with the weapons, because you can actually use them in this mode, and, like, I really like the gun. Even though it looks super basic, I love the metallic purple paint that they added on top of the silver that's already there. Makes the gun really look distinct from every other gun that we've ever got. Then we have the swords where, I guess they're all right. You can put them in his hands, and I just don't know what these are supposed to add. I mean, they don't subtract anything, they're just an extra, and you can combine them into a single sword, a la Kamen Rider Gaim, but it doesn't seem necessary, and I don't know. It's cool, but I don't get the point. It might just add more to Ransack, though, because he was actually supposed to have those two swords combined into his thorax. Thorax, that's it. That's what I was forgetting. They were supposed to combine into Ransack's thorax. But they don't really add anything here on Kickback. I mean, they don't take away anything from Kickback, but they don't really add anything. Speaking of things that neither add nor subtract something from Kickback despite their inclusion, we've got to talk about this chest and sort of the controversy surrounding it. When we all saw this, we immediately assumed that they were going to reintroduce some of the features from the G1 figure. Specifically, the G1 figure had an opening chest that you could shove a minifigure into, from its DNA in the Diaclone line. In fact, now it would make more sense than it would back then, because now we do have minifigures. We have the Titan Masters, and those could have gone into the chest of this figure. One small problem, though. The chest on this figure is locked in tight with two tabs, and the hinge here at the bottom, or at least what looks like a hinge, is glued in place. What makes this even more baffling is not only is the chest hollow, so they could have included this feature, but also they intentionally blocked it off by molding in over the gap in the chest. And I checked by unscrewing the back of this figure and prying it open. This figure does have a hollow chest that could feasibly fit a Titan Master, but they just decided no Titan Master functionality for all of you. And I have to wonder, why? Why not? Well, there is a reason, but it's dumb. We were recently privy to the process which figures undergo when they have to sort of redesign the mold for the budget, specifically with Legacy Pinpointer. The budgeting for that figure required that they remove not only the bicep swivel and the wrist swivel, but also an engine block on the back of the vehicle mode. And why remove all this functionality? Because they had to include Pinpointer's Target Master, which honestly looks like it's gonna be one of the worst things ever made. I think they should have just skipped it and left everything else alone. Make that the sacrifice. But nope, the Hasbro executives decided that we'd get a freaking stupid little minifigure instead of, like, decent articulation and, like, an actually cool accessory? Having said that, in terms of sacrifices for the sake of the budget, I think they made the right one. I'd rather take a figure with fewer play features than I would a figure with fewer points of articulation, because articulation is important to me.
Kickback's head is on a ball joint that possesses a great deal of range, shoulders are universal, arms rotate at the biceps, elbows bend past a 90, hips have universal movement, legs rotate at the thighs, bend 90 degrees at the knees, and ankles tilt 90 degrees.
Thanks, Maya. Compared to the Beast mode, the articulation for Robot mode is actually pretty good. It's average again, but I like it, and it ends up looking dynamic in most of the poses you want this figure to be in. Not to mention that it looks natural for it. It's also really nice. So anyways, size comparisons time. Here he is next to Override.
See, I told y'all she was a Voyager.
Here he is next to Skids. Here he is next to Dragstrip. Here he is next to Transmetal Waspinator. Here he is next to Transmetal 2 Prowl. And here he is next to a standard Kutama, standard Can of Sparkling Water, and Broadside. So that leaves us with one final question to answer, and that is, why do I like this figure so much? And I think it's, well, partially because I just do. I don't always need to have a super complicated reason for liking it, but I think it's also just the fact that it manages to balance the stylings from the cartoon and the stylings from more Greeble Generation series. And it does it so well. Neither overpowers the other. And while I may have a lot of affection for it, that's not going to change my final score because, really, I can see objectively that this is quite average. So I think the score best suited for this figure is a 7 out of 10. And while a 7 out of 10 may seem high, it's really not. It means that while I found a lot to like about this figure, it's not an amazing must-have. It's just good. And really, if good's all you're looking for, you could do worse. Besides, I think that the average is actually extremely important. After all, if we didn't have a baseline to compare everything to, then really, we wouldn't know the difference between what is really good and what's really bad. We'd have no in-between. In other words, to paraphrase a quote from Syndrome in The Incredibles, when everything's super, then nothing is. It's an important distinction that you gotta make, and sometimes a bit of joy can even be found within that average. So with that being said, this is Firebite27, over and out.